What is up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. If you're a person like Randy or I,
Oh,
you're probably going to die, right?
yep.
We all die. We can't help it, can't get away from it. So today we're going to talk about regrets of the dying, which is an interesting topic. Where did you come up with this one?
Well, there's a saying, the seven P's, proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And I was like,
Ah,
there's not many things that are guaranteed in life, but death is one of those certainties. So if you want to
it is.
approach it skillfully, you might want to prepare for it. So, there's this book called The Five Regrets of the Dying. It's by this nurse, Bronnie Ware, who she basically worked with like people who only had 3 or 6 months left to live.
Oh, I read about her before. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Very interesting.
after working with like hundreds of people, she came up, these things were common themes that they talked about that was their biggest regrets. And so she wrote a book about it.
Ah,
So I figured we could go through them today, talk about them, and kind of help ourselves and also everyone listening get prepared for dying. Because,
true.
it's crazy. It's going to happen to all of us. We never know when it's going to happen, but we all assume it's probably not going to be too soon.
Yeah, it's funny too. It's like Camus and Sartre and all, they're big on saying it. Like the only thing we know with certainty is that we'll die. And the funny part is it's like most of us we want a meaning, we want a purpose, and we ask the universe, but the universe doesn't give us an answer. It doesn't tell us why we exist. We have to find it ourselves. And I think, yeah, it's funny because it's so easy to be like, oh, I have plenty of time. I don't have to worry about it. But like if you start to think about it, you can come to accept it. And also I think it helps you live your life in a way so that you don't have those regrets. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard this thing the other day. It was this kid talking about all money dies in the end. So he was talking about how he's known a bunch of like very wealthy people who died and had a whole bunch of money left over. So that was basically like a waste because they couldn't take the money with them. Only
No.
only ancient Egyptian pharaohs could do that. They put the gold in the
Yeah.
sarcophagus with them. But
And
uh
cats and stuff.
yeah. And so he's saying that like you don't want to leave too much money over because then you just waste it. Like sure, maybe it could pass on to your family, but for the most part for you, it's completely wasted. So it's you know finding a way to spend money skillfully, but also save money skillfully and trying to find that golden mean. And I was trying like it's a difficult equation because if I knew when I was going to die, I could calculate to the penny how much I could spend every day. But
Yeah.
because I have no idea when I'll die. Could be tomorrow, could be 50, 100 years from now. And yeah.
You know what I think the problem with that too is it's like it's not about thinking like how can I maximize this so there's nothing left. But I think it's more about, like what is the balance where you're using your money to do things you really want, where it's being useful for you. It's actually, you're actually putting it to use, getting some happiness from it in a way that's also not going to bankrupt you in a day or a year so that you can kind of keep going and live the quality of life you want, because I think that's really what it's about too, is finding
Mm,
that balance of like what quality of life do I want.
yeah.
Yeah.
How can I not be MC Hammer? That's a
Yeah.
good question. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
figured
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just said I figured we start the episode by going over some Marcus Aurelius quotes on death because he talks about it all the time in his meditations and other things.
Constantly.
So, and they're like timeless remarks on death. Were you gonna say
I was
something
just
else
gonna
though?
say, I
Yeah.
was gonna say something else.
Hmm.
So, like a lot of philosophers talk about it all. The existentialists, the Stoics talk about it all the time, and I find it interesting. Like that these wise people, so many of them recognize the importance of admitting that we die. First of all, like one, like actively admitting it to yourself, but also keeping it in the like at the front of your brain, not like thinking about it all the time, but just being aware of it so that like when you do come up with decisions that you have to make, you're like, oh, right, this doesn't last forever. I should choose, right? And actually do something now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely found it helpful in my own life. Like I always think I'm a dead man walking. So like, you know, I like I just I see that like I'm going to die. I don't know when, but I see that I'm a dead man walking. And so like I really have nothing to lose. Like oftentimes these
No.
rationalizations where we delude ourselves into thinking we have something to lose. And whenever it comes down to that stuff, and I recognize, nah, I'm a dead man walking. Like I literally have nothing to lose. So might as well just give it a whirl.
Yeah, it's actually like really freeing, isn't it? Because it's like, if I know this ends, but I don't think there's any point. I mean, make it what you want because this is the time you have. Only you
Hmm.
can live it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what does Marcus Aurelius have to say about death? He says, and I quote, it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I think so many people get stuck there, and I was stuck there for a long, long time because I
Yeah.
was I was busy living what society said I should be, what my parents said I should be, being the good little boy, and all this different stuff. And I was like terrified to actually live according to what I wanted because people would judge me and I could be wrong and all these different
Dude,
things.
but so yeah, and so many people I think live that way though. I've actually had, I literally I think I mentioned this to you before. I actually had a student tell me before, she was like, well, I wish my mom just decided for me what to study in school or something. She's like, because then if it's wrong, at least it's her fault. And I'm like, that's an insane thing to think.
Yeah,
Like
right?
that this is your life and you're not gonna like actively try to live it. But you're right, I think, not being aware of that is also that fear that you might never actually live on your own and take risks for your life. Yeah, it's a good
Oh
one.
yeah, absolutely. You have to live it to yourself. Um, the next one is do not act as if you are going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. I, so I like this one because I think, I mean, I'm guilty of this all the time, thinking that I have a really long life ahead of me. And it's like, you really never know. Like every moment could literally be your last. Like this morning when you woke up, it could 100% be the last time. And so like, but you never
Yeah.
know. Death hangs over you. It's going to happen sometime. And but I like what he says there. While you live, while it's in your power, he doesn't say accumulate the most money. He doesn't say be as
No.
successful as
Yeah.
possible. He doesn't say like buy all the cars and show off to all your neighbors and all this stuff. No, he says be good.
Yeah. You're not trying to win anything. You're not trying to outclass the next person or keep up with the Joneses or any of that BS. You're
Mm-hmm.
just trying to have the best life possible.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
don't we have
It's
leaders like
interesting.
this nowadays?
I don't know. And he was the leader.
Yeah, he was the
Like
richest, most
he must have
popular
been
guy.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like that he says too, don't act like you're going to live 1,000 years because like it is easy. We're not good at telling time and we're not good at thinking of the future. I know I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's easy like to think like, oh, I'm 40. I have at least another this long, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know, dude. I mean, even if you don't die, you could still, yes, we live longer now, but you don't know what the end of your life is going to be like, what quality of life you're going to have. And I think it also speaks to not putting things off. Because I've heard so many people say that, like, oh, I'll travel when I retire, I'll do this when I, and it's like, but you don't know what situation you're going to be in when you retire. You might not be able to walk well. You don't know. And it's like, are you really, you know, actively pursuing the life you want now rather than just putting it off thinking you have forever in this state?
Yeah. I echo that. I like that a lot because like I oftentimes think if I had 6 months left to live, what would I do differently?
Yeah.
Because if I'm not, because that's the real acid test of do you really want to do it? Because
Yeah,
legitimately, we can't, none of us can prove we have more than 6 months left to live. So if there's something that you
no.
want to do and you're not doing it now, assume that it's never going to get done.
Yeah, assume that'll never happen, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of thinking and those sort of like thought experiments of asking yourself those questions are so effective to really get down to at bottom, like what do I value now?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
like, would I be happy? I mean, that's another way to phrase that is would I be happy doing exactly what I'm doing for the next 6 months and not feel like it's a waste if I were to die at the end of that, you know?
Or at least to like try it. So like you hear all these stories of these people who like
Yeah.
want to do stuff. They wanted to write a book, they wanted to start a business, they wanted to have a family, but they just like they have all these reasons why they keep putting it off. So like just assume you have 6 months left to live and be like, okay, just as an exercise, okay, for 6 months, I'll give it a whirl. Why not? Do a little bit every day.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't
And
work out, great, but at least I tried. I can die happy knowing that I tried.
yeah, and at least you took the something. So, if your reasons are just an excuse, that's your choice. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's, yeah, how it works out.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So the next one, I'm just going to skip down a little bit on the list, but
Go for it. I'll let you read the
Death,
ones you like.
yeah, death smiles at all of us. All we can do is smile back.
Oh, I like that. That sounds like a no fear t-shirt. You remember that? You remember that company?
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember that one.
Doesn't it?
I remember, I
Sounds
still
like
remember he who dies with the most toys still dies or something like that.
yeah, yeah. What was the one? I like the one that was like, I don't want to go to my grave smiling, but clawing the ground and like, or whatever it was like being
Yeah.
drug in.
Yeah.
Like, it's good.
I know those are great
Uh,
shirts. They used to make really good
they
shirts
were,
back in the day. But
they did. It sounds like one of their shirts. Anyway.
yeah, I think when I read that or when I hear about that, I think it's kind of like there's like an inside joke that death knows and that we can know too, that like we're all laughing about. Because it's just like it really is a goofy thing. Like people spend so much time and energy being afraid of death and avoiding death and all this stuff. And really, I mean, who knows? It could be the best experience of our lives.
Well, it's funny too. You're right though, because so much of like thinking about it alone dictates so much of what we do, the precautions we take, the choices we make, and it's like how much of that is really like what you actually want versus just what you're afraid of and stuff. And you're right. I mean, everything that things have to die for us to continue living. So
Yeah.
it's like clearly it's a part of the process and it's a necessary part. So, it is funny that we fear it so much because we're individual entities with consciousness, I guess. But
Hmm.
beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of going along with what you're saying there, in everything that you do, pause and ask yourself if death is a dreadful thing because it deprives you of this.
That's a nice way. I like that one.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
like, oh, go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
well, that one reminds me of another one that he has is basically, you know, a man fear I didn't see it here, but something along the lines of like people fear dying because they fear losing these experiences that already happened or these things that they imagine will be in the future. But we don't actually have that. All we ever have is this present moment. So whether you
Yeah.
die 5 years from now or 5,000 years from now, the only thing you can ever lose is this moment.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. Studies have shown, like millions of studies, that our memory is totally false, like all the time. Like we think we remember things really well, but it's all stories we're telling ourselves about that moment. We don't remember it objectively. We don't remember what actually happened. It changes all the time as we like reinterpret our narrative. So most of your memory isn't accurate anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Even things that you think you know really clearly. And we don't know what the hell is going to happen in the future. We've shown that a million times. So yeah, it is kind of funny. We really only have right now.
Yeah.
And that makes it yeah, it makes it, but we don't, it's funny because we so don't often live now. We
Yeah.
live either far into the future or way into the past and
Mm-hmm.
forget, yeah,
Yeah.
what life is actually
Regretting the
about.
past or fearing the future. Yeah, that's where
Yeah,
we sit.
yeah.
That's where we live.
Rather than just lose.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
So
staying.
yeah, so if you want more Marcus Aurelius, read the Meditations or listen to it. There's a free audiobook of it on YouTube. Just search Marcus Aurelius Meditations audiobook. And it's great. You can listen to it double speed, takes less than 2 hours.
Yeah, thankfully he's out of copyright.
I
A
know, right? Well,
couple thousand years will do that
he
to a
can't take
person.
the money with him anyways. Yeah.
No, he already
Yeah.
had all the money. He was
He
good.
did have all the
Yeah,
money. Yeah.
I do. I love the one thing I love. If you, I mean, if you haven't read the Meditations, you should, because to look at a person that had everything and had all the power, and then to see like both that their problems are everyday problems. Like all of his concerns are super normal. Like same thing we worry about, he worried about, and he was the emperor of Rome. You think of them as like a totally different elf or type of person, right? But like he's not. And I think it's just eye opening to see how humble and like normal he was. And then his like the meditations read like the journal. I mean, it reads just like somebody trying to remind themselves to be good every day. And like
Mhm.
the work it takes. I think that's the other thing too people forget is like it's just the work it takes to be yourself, to live a good life, a crappy person. Like it takes effort. No one's just naturally good at it. And I really like the meditations reminds you of all that.
Yeah, it's a great book. And also, I mean, he was the most powerful person of his time. He was the
Yeah.
richest, the most famous. And guess what? He's dead. He's gone. Gone.
Could you
And
dude, could you imagine though if every person that was like in that state of power and like in these companies and corporations acted like him? was that type of
Well,
person, that quality, the world
we
would be
don't live
so
in a world
different.
of ethics and morality anymore. We live in a world of
No,
money, and they're completely
yeah,
different things. Yeah.
they are. I know it's crazy. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, despite it, he had everything that everybody always wished for. Everybody that always says, when
yeah,
I get this, then I'll be happy. He had that. And guess what? He's dead. He's gone. Gone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Gone,
So that
totally gone.
so that brings us, since it happened to him and he had everything, then it's likely going to happen to us as well. We're going to talk
It
about the
is.
5 regrets of the dying. And like I said, I think that this is important because we can look at these regrets and figure how can we prepare to not have these regrets when we die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll read the first one if
Oh,
you want,
right.
and then we go
Yeah.
back and forth. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
That
I'll
sounds
help
good.
out. All right. The first one is I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. You know what's funny? This one I think is a super important because the expectations we feel placed on us by society, others, the world, whatever, are so overwhelming in terms of the direction that can have on our lives. And I also think it's something that we feel so much pressure when we're young, but I think as we age, that pressure goes away a little bit. And if you're lucky, you start to be able to just kind of break away from it entirely. But it's something I think, we all struggle with at first. And the sooner you realize it, the better. That this doesn't have to be what dictates your life, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely think that people are starting to discover more nowadays that they can live life true themselves. But like it's funny
Yeah.
because you hear these kids in like kindergarten, you ask them what they want to do when they grow up, and they're like, I want to be a president, I want to be an
Yeah.
astronaut, I want to be a pilot. And it's like, and then they get to like high school and they're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
like all the creativity and joy is just beaten out of them by the time they get 12 grades in. Everybody's told them they can't amount to anything because they're too bored to actually
Yeah.
pay attention in geometry or whatever it is. So, yeah. But I think this is an important one because uh there are a lot of expectations from others, but also it's not easy to find the life that's true to yourself. Like
No.
I think like you mentioned, the older you get, the easier it gets. Probably because you've experienced a lot more. Like I know for me personally, when I was young, I had no idea on earth what I wanted to do.
No.
Like none
Yeah.
whatsoever. And I was so jealous, like green with envy of these kids who knew what they wanted to do. Like they were an artist and they were good at it and they knew that's what they wanted to do. Or like they were a semi-pro mountain biker and they were good at it and they knew that's what they wanted to do. And like I was so envious of them
Yeah.
because I had no idea. But like it took 40 years of just trying a whole bunch of stuff and being terrible at most of it, being good at some of it, and then finding out what I
Yeah.
actually enjoy.
Well, I think that's the idea of having the courage too. That's the other side of it, which is not being afraid to take chances, to try things, to fail, to find what you really want. And I think it is hard. Or not being or having the courage to listen to yourself actually. Because I think that's a big part of it too, is like actually having self-awareness and listening to yourself. Had I done that earlier, I might have done something totally different. I
Mm.
might have done what I'm doing now earlier.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I laugh all the time because I look back now and I'm like, wow, there are all these signals in my life that were telling me to do exactly what I'm doing now,
yeah.
and yet
Yeah.
I just didn't listen to them.
No, because you had all these other talking heads around you, right? Telling you stuff. And I think that's what makes it so hard is we're
Hmm.
surrounded by people who think they know. I don't even think it's all ill-intentioned. It's just
Hmm.
people that think they know how the world is, but the world's different from when they were younger. The world, it's like all these things are in place that make it different, or it's things they wanted and they're putting it on you.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just it is what it is.
definitely.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. So that brings us to number two. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. This one's actually quite interesting because I
Yes.
enjoy working a lot, but I can also see where people come from, especially like the 9 to 5ers, the 40-hour a weekers who hate their job. I can totally see a lot of them saying, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that this one, I mean, what do you think about it? And then I'll tell you what I think about
I was gonna say I think it's interesting because I think this is I like working a lot, but doing certain things. Like I don't like it I don't like it universally. I don't like it doing certain types of jobs that I've had to do in the past. So I can see where it's coming from because I think working to live is not healthy. And you should have things that you want to do and have time set aside for it and do other stuff. Otherwise, you're not really living life. You're kind of living a very narrow existence.
Hmm.
Or, recognize that if you're gonna, also understand too that like when you're putting a lot in to start something or you're working something, trying to build something, like you better really want it, or that time you're investing in it is gonna conflict with other things that you're not gonna be able to do, and that's gonna, cause regrets later. So I
Yeah.
think this is about knowing really who you are, what you enjoy, and what you want at the time.
Well, it's like all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. So like you need to have other
Yes.
stuff too. Life just isn't about work. And like but sometimes it needs to be work. Like sometimes you need to just work your butt off so that you can dig yourself out of a hole
Yeah.
you've dug yourself, you know? So like sometimes you
Yeah.
need to do
Yeah.
it, but then once you're done that, it doesn't need to be work. And actually, I think this one kind of uh aligns with the first one. I had the courage to live a life true to myself because once you find that work that's true to yourself, you'll do it anyways. Like you don't care.
Yeah.
It's
You will.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's what it is. I think this is more about knowing yourself than it is. Like, I don't think you need a work ethic for sure, because anything you want to do, you need to be able to do the work to do it.
Mhm.
But I think it's about knowing yourself and not expending that. Because a lot of people, I think, just get jobs to survive or to provide for their family. And then they get caught up in that. And it's like that can be, yeah,
Oh,
that can
dude,
be
it's
very
terrible.
regretful at the
It's
end,
like it's like these people they get a job that's far from their home, so they get a car on a car payment, and then they have to pay for gas. So
Yeah.
then all they're doing is they're working to pay the car payment and gas, and it's just like
Yeah.
get something closer to
Yeah.
your
It's
house,
terrible.
save the money.
All right.
Yeah.
The next one is I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. You know, this one is important. This is something I'm not good at. I was never very good
Welcome
at
to the
it.
world of being a man.
I know, right? Like totally, it's true though, right? It is. It's
Yeah.
very hard. And like I think it's something I've been trying to get better at over time.
Hmm.
And I think there is a balance between like at least for me, I've always felt like, it's finding that balance between like expressing your feelings but not whining, or not being
Mm.
dramatic or not, because I think there is a difference between like I also think this is also, had the courage to express my feelings. It's also just a reminder too to be like open to our feelings, to understand them, to recognize them, acknowledge them, not even just to like, not necessarily to always express them, but just to like be aware that they're there and the role they play too is also important.
Yeah. I was just listening to the five love languages, and he was talking about how to recognize your feelings in there. And what he recommended was keep a journal with you and like three times a day, just pull it out and be like, what am I feeling right now for the past few hours? You know? So it's like, oh, I was, being tailgated by that guy. I was angry. And then there was that other thing and I was
Yeah,
upset. And so just like learning to
frustrated, right?
recognize
Yeah,
your feelings. I feel that I'm getting better at recognizing my feelings. Like I definitely know when anger comes up now. Because
yeah,
that's like
yeah,
that's the one that like that's my feeling right now that I definitely recognize quite often. But it's I guess I don't really express them that often.
yeah. Well, it's hard. It's funny too, though. Like, I mean, come on. You grow up in a society where they tell you like if something sad happened, don't cry, don't respond, and it's
Hmm.
hard because you train yourself not to. And I think there is part of that that does carry with you forever. It's very hard to kind of correct. But I think there's the thing, it's like so much of it is just correcting the crap that we're taught when we're young and conditioned to be like, and it's just breaking all those things to
Hmm.
get to like a better
Yeah.
life.
Well, also like what's the benefit of expressing our feelings? Like,
Well,
okay,
see,
so
this is what
this is
okay.
this is this is the reason I ask it. So I have these situations where I get angry and I don't express my feelings. I almost like close down, which granted probably isn't a great reaction to it. But what would be the benefit of expressing anger at that moment?
Let me counter this with I don't think it's about expressing it in that sense, though. I think it's about identifying and utilizing that energy to healthily express it or work through it. So, in other words, like if somebody dies, you don't want your grief to totally derail your whole life, right? You still have life to live. You're still alive, so you want to be able to grieve healthily in some way, right?
Hmm.
Grieve healthily and in an appropriate way and get through it. So, your anger, for instance, right? If you keep blowing up with anger and you keep just pushing it down. That's not healthy either. Nor is it healthy to just blow up and just act out on it every time because it's not going to work socially. There's so many other issues. So I think it's more like finding a way to express it that works.
Mm.
Whether it's like, I think that's why they do this like study, like punching a pillow and stuff, like getting that pent up energy out so that you don't feel it anymore in the same way or you experience it differently. At least
Mm.
that's my take. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
that's
right,
a good
but
one. That's a good one. All right, so that was yours. This one,
yeah.
I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. An important one,
Yeah, it
definitely.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. For all of you listeners out there, Danny and I actually nursed on the teat together. That's how
Yeah,
long we've
we
stayed
did.
together.
Yeah.
Of
Knew
course,
each
that was
other
only a
forever.
year ago, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I was a
kidding.
late bloomer. But no, I think this one's tough for a lot of people because I think, people feel like life changes, things happen, and it's easy to lose track. It's hard to like stay up to date or even know who's truly your friend. It's easy, I think, that was one thing that I was always grateful for is I've had friends that were really good friends that I've stayed in touch with. And like, I think it is important because it's like, it helps you just find to still find things that make you happy and do things that are just for fun and all, and just have people that are always on your side, which is hugely important.
Yeah. And I think also is this isn't only like staying in touch with friends from long ago, but it's also like in a
No, just
modern
in general.
sense. We have all these distractions nowadays. Like everybody thinks they're staying in touch by looking at Facebook and Instagram and all this different stuff, but really you're not. You're deluding yourself. Actually, like
Yeah.
having a conversation with somebody, that's how you
Dude,
stay in touch. Yeah.
going out for drinks or dinner and not having your goddamn phone out, like, and actually interacting with the people right in front of you. That's also
Right.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think like as technology develops, dude, with the metaverse coming online, like actually being a thing now and all, I think like it's more important than ever. They've actually shown too that like a lot of young kids, like even though they have all this access to information, people, social media and stuff, they're actually worse at interperson
Yeah.
interactions because they don't have the skill set.
Yeah.
It's different when you're talking to a real person than it is through a screen and text. It really is. So yeah,
It's freaking nuts. Yes,
that's an
but
important one.
it adds so much to life. Like I can tell this from experience. Just being able to talk with Danny every week makes
Yeah,
a huge difference because here's like someone who cares for my well-being. I care for his well-being, and we can
yeah,
discuss what's going on in life, our problems, and like even like deeply intimate problems that
yeah,
we're ashamed of. We can just express them openly and get
yeah.
and sometimes it's not even what Danny says, it's just having someone there to listen to me, you know?
Oh yeah, dude. And it's like it's funny too because I think like, oh yeah, it's like I wish we started doing this like earlier, like in high school,
Yeah,
honestly, because like
right?
it's like so yeah, it's like it's been so helpful and so awesome, and it's like I hope everybody has somebody like that in their lives because it is important. Like having no being able to have no filter for a time and being able to just kind of say whatever you want it's invaluable. And it's hard to find people that don't judge you for that or that like aren't going to take it the wrong way or something. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last one is I wish that I had let myself be happier. I think this is really interesting because like there's so many times where like, whether it's anxiety, depression, or just like stress and work, where like I feel like I have actively been working against my own happiness. You know what I mean? And like I think it is like literally it's just letting yourself be happy. Like I think naturally we all kind of want to be happy. None of us wants to be miserable. None of us wants to be stressed out. But like we get caught up in it and we get so caught up in our own little BS and our own little world and the importance of ourselves that we don't let ourselves just be happy because letting ourselves be happy also means breaking down some of that importance and breaking down some of that like delusional sense of self and all. And I think it's
Hmm.
it's just funny because it is about letting yourself be happy. I think we can all be happy. It's not impossible.
Absolutely. Yeah, we train ourselves from a very young age to not be happy, to postpone our happiness because we have
Or
these
to
things that
find
we
things
want.
wrong,
Yeah, oh,
everything.
dude, totally. You're looking at like the best like human spell checker. I mean, I find everything that's wrong. But it's like
Yeah,
we train ourselves from a young age to just postpone our happiness. We have these things that we want, and we think, oh, well, once I get that, then I'll be happy. Once I get that, then I'll
yeah,
be happy. Once I have this, then I'll be happy. And it's just like, maybe, but why don't you just be happy now while you're getting it? You
yeah.
know?
Dude, oh my God, I meant to tell you this is on a side, but I was talking about it in my class the other day, the last day that we had class together. And they all said the same thing. They were like, "Oh, but you need money to be happy." And all. And I was like, "Dude, I talk about this with my friend all the time. Like, this is like the classical error we make. We're always future looking, thinking that the happiness is the next stop on the next goal. It's the next thing." I was like, "But lo and behold, you're not going to be happy because you haven't let yourself be happy.
Hmm.
So even when you get that thing, it's not like happiness magically comes. You have to figure out all the other stuff first."
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I've met so many people who have a ton of money, and all of them, they're not happy because somebody has more money than them. They're afraid of losing
yeah.
their money. Like all these different things. They're not any more happy. Actually, I still remember uh there was a guy who I learned to do search engine optimization from, SEO, a number of years ago. And he was probably the first person who I met who was a multimillionaire. He was worth, I think, like 10 million
Oh,
at the time. And
that's nice.
just by chance, I ran into him on the streets in Dallas, Texas. And I was like, dude, what's it like to be a millionaire? And he's like, the same it felt like to be broke. And I'm like, well, that's worthless.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's like you expect this big epiphany, right? This big, like, oh, it's so dramatically different and better, but it's like really it's the same because you're gonna feel the exact same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Whoever you were before, you'll just be that person afterwards. You'll just be amplified.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like I think the guy I mentioned before, Dan Price, who did the base salary of 70,000 for his
Hmm.
employees. Like before he did that, he had $1 million salary. He was the CEO of the company and all, and he talks about at different points like how unfulfilled that was. But when he started to focus on his employees and their happiness and well-being and trying to make sure that like he saw the moral connection between running the business and his employees, like feel so much better because it's like, you're using it's not just empty. It's not
Yeah.
just you racing by yourself, right, against everyone else. It's you recognize that everyone's together working together for it.
And he's adding value to the life of that
Yeah.
many people as opposed to just
To the whole
himself.
community,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
great
It's
thing.
it's infinitely better. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also
Nice.
like I like also how it says I wish I let myself be happier. And you were talking on this earlier, how it is kind of a choice. Like Abe Lincoln says most men are about as happy as they make their minds up to be. And
Yeah.
yeah, it really is a choice. And I hear a lot of you, because I used to say the same thing, who are like, it's not a choice because I'm miserable and I don't want to be
Yeah.
miserable. Like,
Or the world's like this, or
mhm,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I've been there. I've been there. But and it's so much easier when you're on the other side and you're actually happy to
It
say
is.
that
Do
it's a
you get a
choice.
choice?
Yeah, when you're happy, it's a choice. When you're miserable, it's like life sucks. But it may be worth investigating, like, why do you want to change the feeling that you have right now? Like, if you're feeling miserable, well, maybe you're supposed to feel that right now. Like, why bother changing it? Maybe that misery is leading you to find out some lessons about where you are right now. Maybe that's not where you want to be. Like, for instance, and this is just my example, it's an N of one, so maybe it's not true for everybody, but the times in my life when I was the most miserable were times right before a giant course correction in my life. Like
Yeah.
when I was really, really depressed, it was before I needed to make some very serious changes in my life. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up though, because I think that is about letting yourself be happy. It's also deeply experiencing the lows to understand what needs to be changed. Because like I had my same experience, dude. The worst time in my life arguably was also the most important for course correcting, for actually doubling down on what I really wanted to do, starting that process, getting that ball rolling, taking care of my mental health and everything. Like literally all of it, I think, required a deep experience of that low in order to recognize, hey, this is fundamentally not what I want. And to let myself be happy, I have to start letting myself make the right choices too, that are for me rather than for others or for the world or whatever. And I think that's important too.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. So that's the 5 regrets of dying in a nutshell.
Five
You
regrets of
have them
dying.
all right
So
there.
hopefully now you at least are aware of them and we gave you some advice, maybe not regret when
Yeah.
you die.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's an important exercise to sit down, because I sometimes do this every once in a while when I'm journaling in the morning. I'm like, if I were to die today, would I have anything that I would regret, either doing or not doing? Because
Yeah.
I think that's important. So then at least it brings it into your awareness. And then if you want to, you can actually change it. Because like we mentioned earlier, we never know how long we're going to be around for. So you might as well clear up your stuff now.
Yeah, that's an important one too, because I've done that. I've done that. I actually do that kind of regularly, like sort of fairly regularly, and it's
Yeah.
helpful because it really helps me assess like the course I'm on. Like, is this still the right path? It also helps me recognize like when, hey, I'm not spending enough time with the people I really love and stuff, and like I need to do that more because I do miss them. And I'm like, when I take a moment to think about it, I realize that I am, like, and I think it's a really helpful exercise. Yeah, so that you
Hmm.
don't end up regretting later. Because if you fix it now, you won't regret it later. That's the other beautiful thing,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. I think, I mean, from looking at this list, I think a lot of this comes from just like getting caught in the rat race of life and never
Oh
really
yeah,
having a time to like pick your head up and look around, gain some
breathe.
perspective. Yeah,
Yeah,
breathe. Yeah.
yeah,
So, starting to give yourself that time where you can do that. And I understand if you have multiple jobs, it's very, very hard, but like there's got to be some time while you're sitting in the car before work starts or something. Like I remember when I was working, there were some day there was I worked 31 days in a row. And there was one of those days in the middle where I worked 24 hours straight. This was when I was doing like the emergency vet work. And I
yeah.
remember there were still moments like I remember very clearly sitting in my car before going into uh the hospital to work, but that was like my time. And I use that time to
Yeah.
like collect myself and to do the stuff. So like finding those small moments, because you don't need 3 years on a mountaintop to do it. You just
No,
need 5 minutes every day.
you need small moments. Yeah, and I think you're right though. We get so caught up in the rat race, get so caught up in the everyday stresses, and instead of using the small moments you have, what we do is we distract ourselves. We listen to stuff, we watch things, we scroll social media to forget about our day because we're stressed out. But that doesn't actually rejuvenate you. It doesn't help you solve problems. It just keeps you in that race, running and on that wheel without ever getting a chance to look outside and see, hey, is this where I want to be? Is this where I want my boat to go or whatever, however you want to, whatever analogy or metaphor you use.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add anything else?
No, I think that's good. I think we're all going to die, and now we're
We
prepared.
are all definitely going to die. And now we're prepared for it. We won't have regrets.
Wouldn't that be
So
funny
that
if
is the
there's
fun.
somebody who's listening who's like, guess what? I'm not. And they were right.
I've never happened.
Good old Tuck Everlasting. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Stay young forever. But so yeah, so if you guys stayed with us, hopefully this helps. Check us out later this week for a quick fix. Like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back then, no later, whatever. Anyway, until then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.